I never thought owning a multi-million-dollar beach property empire would be my best-kept secret, but watching my sister's face transform from smug superiority to shocked disbelief made every moment of hiding my success worth it. Before I tell you how my carefully maintained facade crumbled in the most satisfying way possible, let me know in the comments if you've ever been underestimated by family. If this story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe because trust me, the revenge is sweeter than ocean breeze. My name is Victoria Parker, and at 32, I had what anyone would call a perfectly crafted double life. To my family, I was the struggling youngest daughter who never lived up to her potential. In reality, I was the silent owner of Parker Coast Properties, one of the fastest-growing luxury real estate companies in Southern California. Growing up in suburban Michigan, I was always the odd one out in our picture-perfect family of four. My parents, James and Margaret Parker, had built their lives around my older sister Diana's achievements. Diana, with her perfect grades, homecoming queen crown, and full scholarship to Stanford, set a standard I apparently could never reach. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. While Diana excelled at debate club and student government, I spent hours studying real estate listings and property investment strategies. My father, a high school economics teacher, dismissed my interests as unrealistic dreams. "The real estate market is for people with capital, Victoria," he'd say, barely looking up from Diana's latest academic award. "Focus on something practical." Even my mother, though gentler in her approach, echoed his doubts. "Honey, perhaps you should consider teaching like your father. It's a stable career." The only person who ever encouraged my passion was my grandmother, Elizabeth. During summer visits to her small beach cottage in California, she would sit with me for hours, poring over property listings and teaching me about market trends. "You have an eye for potential, Victoria," she'd say, watching me analyze beachfront developments. "Don't let anyone dim your vision." Those summers with Grandma Elizabeth became my sanctuary and education. In her modest library filled with books on real estate investment and business strategy, I discovered my future. While my family thought I was just enjoying beach vacations, I was actually building the foundation of my empire. By 18, I had mapped out my entire career path. While Diana headed to Stanford, I chose a local college, majoring in business administration with a focus on real estate management. My parents saw it as settling for less. I saw it as strategic positioning. "At least she's going to college," I overheard my mother tell a friend. "Though I wish she'd aimed higher like Diana." What they didn't know was that I was already working part-time for a local real estate agency, learning the industry from the ground up. Every commission I earned went straight into a separate savings account, my future investment fund. Grandmother Elizabeth passed away during my sophomore year, leaving me her beach cottage and, more importantly, her extensive network of real estate contacts. My parents assumed the cottage was a burden, an old property that I couldn't afford to maintain. "You should sell it," Dad advised. "Use the money for something practical." Instead, I used the cottage as collateral for my first major investment, a foreclosed beachfront property that I renovated and flipped for triple the purchase price. That success became the cornerstone of Parker Coast Properties, though the company was registered under a holding corporation that couldn't be traced back to me. Over the next 10 years, I built my business carefully and quietly. To my family, I remained the underachieving daughter who worked in real estate. They assumed as a low-level agent. Meanwhile, my company acquired prime beachfront properties up and down the California coast, renovating them into luxury vacation rentals and exclusive residences. Diana's path followed our parents' perfect script. After Stanford, she married Michael Thompson, a successful corporate lawyer, and they settled into an upper-middle-class life in Chicago. Their annual Christmas cards showcased their growing family and increasing prosperity, always accompanied by subtle digs at my apparent lack of progress. "We're so blessed," Diana would write. "Though we pray Victoria will find her path soon." I maintained my cover perfectly, living in a modest apartment and driving a reasonable car when visiting family. During these visits, I endured endless comparisons and thinly veiled disappointment. "Diana just made partner at her consulting firm," Mom would say over dinner. "Isn't that wonderful, Victoria? Perhaps she could help you find a better position." The facade might have continued indefinitely if Diana hadn't decided she deserved a piece of my grandmother's legacy. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning as I was reviewing acquisition proposals in my private office. Not that my family knew about the sleek downtown headquarters of Parker Coast Properties. "Vicky," Diana's voice dripped with artificial sweetness. "I've been thinking about Grandma's beach cottage." I knew that tone. It was the same one she'd used when convincing our parents to give her my college fund because she needed it more. "What about it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral as I signed off on a $12 million property purchase. "Well, Michael and I want to start taking the kids on regular beach vacations, and that cottage would be perfect. I know you can barely afford the upkeep, so we'd be willing to buy it from you. We'd even let you visit occasionally." The audacity of her assumption made me grip my pen tighter, but I maintained my calm. "The cottage isn't for sale, Diana. Don't be difficult, Vicky. We both know you're struggling. Michael and I would offer a fair price, and you could use the money to finally get your life together." Before I could respond, she continued with what she clearly thought was a generous offer. "We're planning a family vacation next month. Why don't you join us? We can discuss the details then. I've already found the perfect rental property right near the cottage." That's when I realized Diana had already booked one of my company's luxury beach houses, though she had no idea it belonged to me. The irony was delicious. "Which property?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "The Azure Cove Villa. It's gorgeous, 6 bedrooms, private beach access, infinity pool. Obviously way out of your price range, but you can stay with us since you're family." The Azure Cove Villa was actually my personal favorite among my properties, a $15 million estate that I'd renovated myself. The fact that Diana had unknowingly rented it from me while simultaneously dismissing my success was almost poetic. "Sure," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "I'd love to join you." "Perfect. Mom and Dad are coming too. It'll be just like old times." As I hung up, I looked around my office with its wall of awards and acquisitions. For 10 years I'd hidden my success to avoid family drama. But perhaps it was time for the truth to come out, in the most spectacular way possible. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. I coordinated with my property manager, Sarah, to ensure everything would be perfect for the upcoming revelation. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Sarah asked as we reviewed the arrangements. "Once they know, everything will change." "It's time," I replied, thinking of Diana's condescending tone. "They need to see who I really am." The day of the family vacation arrived with picture-perfect weather. I drove my modest car to the Azure Cove Villa, arriving just after my family. Diana, Michael, and their 3 children were already exploring the property while our parents unpacked their luxury SUV. "Victoria," Mom called out, her tone carrying familiar disappointment. "Couldn't you have dressed more appropriately for the beach?" I looked down at my simple sundress, hiding a smile. They had no idea it was a custom-made piece that cost more than their car. "Leave her alone," Diana said with false generosity. "Not everyone can afford a proper vacation wardrobe." The next hour was a parade of subtle jabs and patronizing comments as Diana showed off her vacation home, acting as if she owned the place. Mom and Dad oohed and awed over every feature, while Michael made pointed comments about his recent bonus. "The rental agent is coming by to give us a proper tour," Diana announced as we gathered on the terrace. "Though Victoria, you might want to make yourself scarce. We wouldn't want them to think we're exceeding the guest limit." That was my cue. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Sarah. Everything was about to change. The doorbell rang and Diana rushed to answer it, ready to play the role of wealthy client. I heard Sarah's professional voice in the foyer. "Good afternoon, I'm here to welcome the guests of Azure Cove Villa." "Yes, that's us," Diana said proudly. "We're so excited to be here." "Wonderful," Sarah replied, stepping onto the terrace. "I just need to confirm some details with the owner first." Diana's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, is the owner coming by?" Sarah's eyes met mine and she smiled. "The owner is already here." The silence that fell over the terrace was deafening. Diana's perfectly maintained smile froze as Sarah walked directly toward me, portfolio in hand. "Miss Parker," Sarah said professionally, though I caught the slight gleam of anticipation in her eyes. "Everything is prepared according to your specifications. Would you like to conduct the property tour yourself?" Diana laughed nervously. "There must be some mistake. My sister Victoria is just visiting. She could never afford." "Actually," I interrupted smoothly, standing up, I think it's time for some honesty. I turned to Sarah. Could you bring the property portfolios from the car? As Sarah left, my family stared at me in confusion. Mom clutched her designer handbag like a shield, while Dad's expression wavered between disbelief and dawning realization. What's going on, Victoria? Michael demanded, his lawyer instincts clearly sensing something big was about to happen. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific, remembering how I'd personally selected every detail of this house during its renovation. You know, Diana, when you called about Grandma's cottage, it made me realize something. I've been hiding who I am for far too long. Sarah returned with a sleek leather portfolio bearing the Parker Coast Properties logo. My family's eyes followed it as I placed it on the glass coffee table. 10 years ago, I continued opening the portfolio. I started a company. Today, Parker Coast Properties owns 37 luxury beachfront properties across Southern California, including this one. I gestured to our surroundings. Total portfolio value, just over $400 million. The only sound was the distant crash of waves and my mother's sharp intake of breath. Diana's face had drained of color. That's impossible, she stammered. You're just a real estate agent. I smiled, pulling out the company financials. Actually, I'm the founder and CEO. Everything you see here, the infinity pool you admired, the imported marble countertops, even the artwork in the foyer, I personally selected during the renovation. Dad stepped forward, his economics teacher instincts kicking in. Show me, he demanded, reaching for the portfolio. For the next 30 minutes, I walked them through my empire. The property acquisitions, the renovation projects, the rental income streams, everything I'd built while they assumed I was failing. But how? Mom finally asked, her voice small. Where did you get the startup capital? Remember Grandma's cottage? The one Diana thinks I can't afford to maintain. I pressed a button on a remote and a large screen descended from the ceiling. This is what I did with my inheritance. Images appeared showing the transformation of Grandma's modest cottage into a boutique luxury rental property. It generates $40,000 per month in peak season. That was just the beginning. Michael, ever the lawyer, was scrutinizing the financial statements. These profit margins are impressive, he admitted grudgingly. But why keep it secret? I thought back to all the family dinners where they dismissed my career, the Christmas cards full of subtle digs, the constant comparisons to Diana's successful path. At first, it was about proving to myself that I could do it without anyone's help or interference. Then, as the company grew, I realized something. Your underestimation of me was actually an advantage. No one questions the struggling sister. No one looks too closely at her business dealings. It was the perfect cover. Diana, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly found her voice. So all this time when we were trying to help you, offering you opportunities, you were what? Laughing at us? Help me. I repeated incredulously. You mean like trying to pressure me into selling Grandma's cottage? Or suggesting I needed Diana's connections to find a better position? Sarah, who had been quietly observing, chose this moment to interject. Miss Parker, the property tour is scheduled to begin. Should I proceed with the full portfolio presentation? I nodded, watching my family's reactions carefully. Yes, I think it's time they saw everything. What followed was a meticulously planned revelation of my entire real estate empire. Sarah pulled up detailed presentations of each property, including the private beach clubs, the luxury vacation rentals, and the exclusive residential developments. This is our latest acquisition, Sarah explained, displaying images of a stunning cliffside estate. Purchased last month for $28 million. Ms. Parker personally oversees all major property decisions. My parents, who had once dismissed my real estate dreams as unrealistic, sat in stunned silence as the true scope of my success became clear. But your apartment in Michigan, Mom protested weakly. Your old car. A cover, I explained. My real residence is the penthouse in our Newport Beach development. As for cars, I smiled. Sarah, could you show them the garage? The screen displayed the underground garage of my actual home, where my collection of luxury vehicles sat gleaming. Diana's husband Michael actually whistled at the sight of the rare vintage Aston Martin. The modest car I drive to family events is just for appearances, I explained. Like everything else you thought you knew about my life. As the presentation continued, I could see the shift in my family's dynamics happening in real time. The confidence with which Diana had walked into the villa was crumbling. Dad's dismissive attitude had transformed into something approaching respect, while Mom seemed torn between pride and embarrassment. "There's one more thing you should know," I said, saving the biggest revelation for last. "Remember how you found this rental listing, Diana?" She nodded uncertainly. "It wasn't actually available for rent. None of my properties are at the moment." I paused for effect. "I made an exception and had this one listed briefly when I heard you were looking. Consider it my way of finally revealing the truth." "You manipulated us?" Diana's voice rose with indignation. "I created an opportunity," I corrected. "You're the one who chose this property, bragged about being able to afford it, and suggested I should make myself scarce during the rental agent's visit." The sun was setting over the Pacific, casting long shadows across the terrace. Sarah discreetly withdrew, leaving my family to process everything they'd learned. "So what happens now?" Dad asked, his teacher's analytical mind clearly trying to make sense of this new reality. I walked to the wine cellar and returned with a bottle of rare vintage champagne. "Now we celebrate the truth. And tomorrow we begin a new chapter. One where you see me for who I really am." As I poured the champagne into crystal flutes, I could feel the weight of 10 years of secrets lifting from my shoulders. The carefully maintained facade had crumbled, but in its place stood something stronger: the truth of my success. "To new beginnings," I proposed, raising my glass. My family raised their glasses automatically, still somewhat shell-shocked. As the expensive champagne sparkled in the fading sunlight, I knew the real test was yet to come. How would they adjust to this new reality? Would Diana accept that her struggling sister was actually wildly successful? Could my parents reconcile their decades of doubt with the evidence of my achievements? The answers would come soon enough. For now, I savored the moment of revelation, watching the last rays of sun glint off the infinity pool I'd designed in the house I owned, surrounded by the family who finally had to acknowledge my true worth. The morning after my revelation dawned with a different energy. I woke early in the master suite, the one Diana had tried to claim when they first arrived, and made my way to the terrace. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, a reminder of how far I'd come from that little girl studying property listings in Grandma's cottage. The sound of footsteps made me turn. Dad stood in the doorway, looking somehow older in the morning light. "You're up early," I said, gesturing to the coffee maker I'd already started. He poured himself a cup, his economics teacher habits showing in how he measured his words before speaking. I couldn't sleep much. Kept going over the numbers in my head. "And your profit margins are exceptional." He paused. "I spent years telling you to be more practical, to think smaller. I was wrong." Coming from my father, this admission was seismic. Before I could respond, Mom appeared, already dressed for the day but missing her usual polish. "Victoria," she began, then stopped, seemingly unsure how to continue. The woman who had always known exactly what to say to highlight my shortcomings was now speechless. "Good morning, Mom," I said calmly, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Sleep well." She accepted the cup with trembling hands. "I kept thinking about all the times the things we said to you." "You mean like suggesting I should consider teaching because it's stable?" I couldn't resist the small dig. Mom's face flushed. "We thought we were helping. Protecting you from disappointment. By constantly disappointing me yourselves?" The silence that followed was heavy with decades of misunderstandings and missed connections. "I reviewed your company's portfolio again last night," Dad said, pulling out his reading glasses and some notes he'd made. "The way you leveraged Grandma's cottage as seed capital, the strategic property acquisitions, the timing of your market entries." He shook his head in amazement. "It's brilliant. Seems those unrealistic dreams paid off after all," I replied, watching his expression carefully. Before he could respond, Diana emerged onto the terrace, looking less put together than I'd ever seen her. Michael trailed behind, clutching his phone like a lifeline. "I just got off the phone with our financial advisor," Michael announced without preamble. "Trying to understand how we missed this. Your company's market position is remarkable." Diana shot him a look that could freeze hell. "Really, Michael? You're impressed by her deceiving everyone for years." "Diana," Mom started, but I held up my hand. Let's address this directly, I said, turning to my sister. You're upset because I hid my success. But ask yourself why I felt the need to hide it. Because you enjoyed making us look foolish? Diana snapped. No, I replied calmly. Because every achievement in my life has been measured against yours. Every choice I made was questioned because it didn't follow your path. Even now, you're more angry about losing the upper hand than happy for my success. The truth of my words hung in the morning air. Diana's face cycled through emotions, anger, embarrassment, and finally something approaching understanding. I want to show you something, I said, standing up. All of you. I led them to my home office in the villa, a room they hadn't seen during yesterday's tour. The walls were lined with framed documents. My first property deed, the company's incorporation papers, awards for architectural design and business innovation. But I directed their attention to a particular frame in the center. This is the first letter Grandma wrote to me after I started the company, I explained. She was the only one who knew the truth. Mom stepped forward to read it, her eyes widening at our grandmother's words. My dearest Victoria, your latest acquisition makes my heart soar. While others see you through the lens of comparison, I see you building an empire with quiet determination. One day they'll understand what I've always known, that your different path wasn't wrong, just extraordinary. All my love. Grandma Elizabeth. She knew. Mom whispered. All this time. She knew because she believed in me enough to look closer, I replied. She never needed me to be anyone but myself. Diana had moved to examine the industry awards. The Innovative Developer of the Year award. That was you? I remember reading about it in the business journal. Yes, I confirmed. That property renovation project you praised last Christmas? The one you told everyone was exactly what that rundown beach area needed? That was mine too. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Why tell us now? Dad asked. Why not maintain what did you call it? Your cover. I walked to the windows overlooking the coast, my coast in many ways. Because success without authenticity becomes hollow. I'm proud of what I've built. I'm tired of hiding it. And the cottage? Diana asked quietly. I suppose my offer to buy it seems ridiculous now. The cottage stays exactly as it is, the foundation of everything I've built. But, I turned to face them, I'm willing to discuss a proper family vacation arrangement. One based on mutual respect, not assumed superiority. The next few hours were filled with detailed conversations about my business, my life, and the future of our family relationships. Mom cried when I showed her my real home through photos. The penthouse she'd never seen. Dad asked countless questions about my investment strategies, his pride finally outweighing his preconceptions. Michael, ever the pragmatist, proposed potential business collaborations which I politely deflected. Some boundaries were still necessary. As for Diana, the adjustment was more complicated. Years of being the family's measure of success had shaped her identity as much as being the unsuccessful sister had shaped mine. I don't know how to be your sister without being your superior, she admitted during a private moment on the beach that afternoon. Try being my equal, I suggested. It's more interesting than looking down on people. By the time the sun set on our second day at Azure Cove Villa, the initial shock had evolved into something more nuanced. Mom and Dad were wrestling with their regret while trying to express their pride. Diana was quietly reevaluating our entire relationship. Michael was still making notes about my business model. As we gathered for dinner, catered by my private chef, another revelation that delighted Mom and annoyed Diana, I raised my glass for a toast. To family, I said, and to seeing people as they are, not as we assume them to be. The echo of "to family" around the table carried different weights for each person. For Mom and Dad it was tinged with remorse and hope. For Diana, it was a reluctant acknowledgement of a new reality. For me it was liberation. Later that night, as the family settled into their rooms, I returned to the terrace. Sarah had stopped by with some company documents needing my attention. Actual work didn't stop for family revelations. How are you feeling? She asked as I signed the papers. Relief? Regret? I considered the question, looking out at my carefully built world that was no longer a secret. Authentic. Finally. And your family? They're adjusting. It's not perfect, but it's real. That's worth more than any property in our portfolio. As Sarah left, I received a text from Diana. Can't sleep. Too many thoughts. Coffee tomorrow? Just us. I smiled, typing back, yes. I know a great little beach cafe. I own it. The response came quickly, of course you do. Show off. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. A new chapter where success didn't have to be hidden and family relationships could be rebuilt on a foundation of truth rather than assumptions. Looking out at the moonlit ocean, I thought about Grandma Elizabeth and how she'd encouraged me to follow my own path. She'd known that sometimes the greatest success isn't just in achieving your dreams, but in finally being able to share them. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or pushed to hide your light, remember this. Success doesn't need to follow someone else's path. Your journey might be different, might need to be hidden for a while, but when the time comes to reveal your truth, make it count. Have you ever had to hide your success from family? Or felt the need to downplay your achievements to keep the peace? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey of hidden success and sweet revelation resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about triumph over underestimation. Remember, sometimes the greatest power lies not in proving others wrong, but in finally letting them see exactly who you are.